Right. Okay. So welcome to part 6. I believe this is. Maybe I can finish it up with this and make it an hour series. This is part 6 of how to write engaging scenes, and we're continuing on with the MRUs. That is motivation, reaction units, as Dwight calls them. I still kind of look at it as inhale, exhale, or motivation, reaction, or action, reaction. You really don't want to get too sticky with it. Be a stickler about it because, I said sticky, be a stickler about it because you really don't need to be. But it is good to keep in mind while writing. It will make your writing better. Okay, so this is brought to you by Master Edit. Please check out the Master Edit software in the description. It's either to your right or to the bottom, depending if you're in the channel or not. It's really cool software. I use it all the time. It makes editing so much easier and better. It makes your manuscript better in the long run. So what we're looking at here is a rough draft of a novel I'm working on called End of All, which you can check out on WeBook. If you ask for an invite, I'm only letting so many people in the private thing, though, because for publishing reasons. Anyway. So then I decided to have her have a emotional reaction. Even though this is like physical, it's actually an emotional reaction. The shivers down the spine is kind of like an emotional reaction. This is, these things happen instantaneously, before you actually talk. So, you want to make sure you put them in logical order. So this comes before she talks then. Their voice is no longer sexy, sent shivers down Skyla's spine. We only need 7 apples, she said. You can have the rest. And then I decide to have some introspection to kind of, share what's on her mind. Skyla hoped that they would agree because she had no idea how to fight nymphs. If the nymphs decided to suck up all the apples, suck up is now, it makes sense in context because they use their wind powers to pull leaves and stuff off trees. If the nymphs decided to suck up all the apples as they did the leaves to form their bodies, what could Skyla do to stop them? So I decided to, add these thoughts, and the thoughts happen after the speech. And the reason why I decided to add the thoughts in there is because, one, I wanted to break up the, this is why you always want to think of it in these MRU units, and that is the action-reaction, or the inhale-exhale. Remember, the inhale is what's happening outside of the character. It's what's happening to the character or what other people are doing. So in this case, the outside was the nymphs speaking to her, ripping the leaves off the tree, forming bodies, and then speaking to her. And then I had her emotional response, and then I had her verbal response, then I have her thinking response. So this is like the exhale. So you want to think about, the inhale part of the action-reaction within a scene. This is the miniature inhale within a scene, not the actual inhale of a scene. So the motivation is usually some outside of the character. It's obviously going to be observable because you can't, unless you're writing omniscient point of view, you can't share their thoughts and emotions and feelings. You're only sharing the thoughts, emotions, and feeling of your point of view character. And so you're only going to share externally what happened. So externally what happened was a bunch of leaves ripped away from the tree and swirled in the sky. They formed the shapes of 3 women. The fruit is ours, they said together. This here is this is known as the motivation. This is motivating your main character to do something. And that is, first, it invokes an emotional response. And there's always those 3 things you want to keep in mind. The emotional response, which usually comes first. Now, obviously, if logic tells you it shouldn't come first for some reason, then, you put it after something else. Maybe the feeling comes after the thought because the thought triggers the feeling. So in that case, you want to put it after the thought. But the 3 things you want to always keep in mind and always look for opportunities to write these 3 responses is the emotional response, which can be adrenaline rush, shaking of hand, shivers down the spine, so forth, tear in the eye. It's like automatic responses, things that you really don't have control over. You don't have control over when you blink a bunch of times, or when the shivers happen down the spine, or your eyes start to tear up, or adrenaline rush. So these types of things you usually write first. But anyway, keep that in mind. Always try to think of that emotional response, that automated response, and then you have the physical action, that they're going to take, because next is usually a physical reaction they're going to take, and that can be speech or it can be doing something physically with their body. I can also have thought of something she physically does with the body, but she doesn't really do anything here physically with the body. Maybe I can write, she said backing away or pulling away from the nymphs. I'm gonna go ahead and add that. That's good actually. And see, doing this, I try hard to think about all this while I'm writing my rough draft, but I also don't want to bog myself down, so I only keep it in the back of my mind, and I try not to slow down. I like to punch out my chapters as fast as possible while I have the muse, while I'm juicing with the creativity. And then when I go back to edit, I go and I really put a lot of thought into each part, each action, reaction to see, okay, here's a reaction. Can I use all three of them? Can I use the emotional response, that is the automated things? Can I do her physical response, both speech and physical body? What does her physical body do in response to this? And so I was just thinking about these things, and I added to all this. Originally, all I had was her speech and thoughts, but now I added all of them. I have her automated response to what just happened. Then I have her speech response to what happened. Then I have her physical body response, and this gave me a chance to add a little bit of humor, pulling away from the nymphs as if they smelled bad. And I could actually intensify the comedy a little bit by exaggerating maybe. Because remember, I'm going for the specific is always better than the general. And this is general. They smelled bad is general. I want to get more specific to paint a better picture and also maybe a heighten the comedy. I decided to go a little overboard with it. But this whole novel kind of has a lighthearted feel like this to it. We only need 7 apples, she said, pulling away from the nymphs as if they ripped farts that smelled like the farts of Obphase. And well, you'd have to smell the farts of You'd have to smell an Obphase fart to understand. Actually, I just realized I should rewrite. This way it kind of flows better, and you'd have to smell the fart of an Obphase to understand. You can have the rest. All right, so now I've added all of the types of reactions. That is the automated response, the speech, the physical response, what her physical body does in response to what they did. That is, she backs away from them, and that was a direct response to them. So make sure that it's a direct response to what they did, to what happened before. So whatever the motivation was, that's why it's motivation. This is the motivation. So they caused her to move away, right? So you want to keep this in mind, that first something happens, and then how does your character react to it? Make sure that every one of these things, the automated response, the speech, the physical response, and the thought response, are all direct triggers, direct reactions to the action that happened outside of the character. And then finally, I share the thoughts that stem from that. And then I decided also to kind of share her thoughts. This was almost like, then sometimes the character will then put a counter. That is, they'll now counter. After they have reacted to, now they're going to counter-react. Her counter-reaction is just a thought. That is, she's thinking, if the nymphs decide to suck up all the apples as they did the leaves to form their bodies, what could Skylar do to stop them? And this adds more tension, like, oh no, she doesn't know how to fight these things, because that adds kind of like some tension there. You killed one of our fathers is the nymph's response. She didn't even want to understand how trees were their fathers. So that's her only response, is just a thought response. And I can then, as I'm editing, I can go back and think about these MRUs. This is the motivation, so I can think about the different kinds of ways she can respond. She can have an automated response. Does she have another automated response to, you kill one of our fathers? She could, but I don't want it to go overboard. I don't want it to become melodramatic. She already had the spine tingling from the way they talk, so the second time they talk, she's kind of used to it. Maybe I can even mention that. Her spine didn't tingle so much this time. Then I can think of, after the automated response, what other kind of responses can she have? She can also have a thought response. I have that there. She can also have a speech response. I could put a speech response there, but I wanted to get Cloud in on the action as well, because I don't want to leave him out of the scene. And she can also have, those really it. A bodily response. Maybe her body does something as a response to them talking like that. Maybe she backs away even further now, or maybe she relaxes a bit. So you think about all those things as you're going. So you always have this back and forth action reaction. Please come back for one more part. I think I'm going to do one more part for this one.